And here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share yet another update on my experience with the Asus Zephyrus G15. Now, for those of you that have been following my coverage, you already know this is one of the most coveted laptops on the market right now. Pretty much sold out everywhere here in the US at least. The Best Buy model that I have does have RGB backlighting. It's not on right now. I've been getting a lot of questions about that. It does have it. You can only select one color. It's not per key like the Aero 15 that I have here in the studio as well, but still very good. And, you know, overall, this is an incredibly satisfying gaming laptop that also fits the bill for content creators. And if you've followed my coverage, as well as my comparison to the Aero 15, you already know all of that. What I wanted to talk about today really centers on quality control, stability, and concerns that I have about those issues. But first, one of you in the comments pointed out that I should switch the iGPU mode to on, essentially, of course, taking the wattage away from the NVIDIA 3070, and I did that. And it does help with battery life, so that is a formal correction on my behalf because that's something I should have picked up on from the very beginning. So that does make a difference. Now, how tangible a difference, I've yet to really see, but there is a difference, and I will eventually report how much juice we're able to get out of that. Now, that's not a new concept to me. Essentially, you know, NVIDIA with their Optimus technology basically auto selects, decides whether or not you need their GPU. And sometimes that works well, sometimes it fails horribly. So it is nice that inside of Asus's Armory Crate, which has this dedicated button right here, you can turn that on and off. And I hadn't played with it because, quite frankly, again, NVIDIA generally handles that on its own. But it does seem like there is a gain. So we'll see how much of a gain. I'm not there yet. But back to what I was focusing on here for the video, which is really the quality control. I've mentioned this because I have had some issues. It's not a ton, but enough that all of you need to know about it, because I'm not sure how many other reviews out there reflect that quality control is something that you do still need to worry about. So the first thing I want to talk about is flickering with the display. It hasn't done it a lot, but it has. It has flickered. I don't know if that's a result of the actual connection between the display and the board being loose, but that generally is why that would happen. Of course, it could be something BIOS related. I am at the current BIOS revision, so anyone who is wondering or thinks that I'm not there, I am, which is 404 at the time of this review, which is February 20th. I should say video, not review. So just something to be aware of. That screen flickering, it's not happening all the time, but it's happened enough that if I didn't mention it, I would literally be lying. Which I don't even lie by omission. Sorry, not in my repertoire. So that's number one. And I don't know if alternatively that has something to do with the fact that we've got this brand new 15.5-inch QHD 165 hertz panel. I don't know if it has something to do. I mean, everything in this machine is bleeding edge, brand new. The display, the CPU, the Ryzen 9 5900 HS, and of course, the NVIDIA RTX 3070. So everything here is brand new. And this basically never happens in the computing world, meaning all parts, except for, of course, you know, the keyboard. But even that has a little bit of a redesign, the trackpad. But again, the CPU, GPU, and display all being brand new tech, I don't think it's ever happened. But it has on this model, which is why, as I called it a unicorn once, I still will today. Highly sought after, sold out everywhere, and understandably so. But the flickering is real. The next thing, which I mentioned, and I'm really doing this for those of you that haven't watched the long format videos, blue screen of death. I've had it a few times. It's not happening all of the time, but I have not seen that on the main gear element in the time I've spent with it thus far, or the Aero 15. This is the only machine where I've actually had any BSOD, and that just, of course, bothers me. It's concerning. It doesn't mean that there is an underlying problem. That likely is software related, not hardware related. But that brings me to the hardware concerns beyond the display. And that's the 8 gigs of RAM that is soldered. Now, many of you have explained away that that's not a big deal, and I understand for some of you that may be irrelevant. But when your 1-year warranty is up on this machine, if that RAM has any sort of problem, you will be looking at hundreds of dollars. I'm not saying this because I know exactly what Asus will charge you, but it will be ransom. It will absolutely not be the cost to replace an 8 gig DIMM of RAM. It will be the cost of their labor, the soldering, all of that bullshit, because they soldered that 8 gig DIMM of RAM. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's very peculiar that they did that. It actually is a red flag to me personally. So while right now I'm loving, not to sound like this is a McDonald's commercial from the 90s, is it the 90s that was in? I'm loving it. I'm loving the G15. I mean, the performance is amazing. The display is great. Some people bitch about the brightness. I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's a really well-balanced machine. Battery life is good. Gaming, video editing. I mean, it's a little bit of a dream machine, and it's so quiet. I mean, granted, I'm in the silent profile right now, but I was just telling a friend of mine today that even gaming, unplugged, in performance mode, step it up to performance mode, the fans were barely audible. This was playing GTA 5, pulling, about 88, 90 frames per second, and again, off of the power plug. I mean, that's just crazy to think about a gaming laptop being able to do that. Now, that's something that the Aero 15 can't do, that the Asus can. But back to that soldered RAM. The flickering with the display, if it's BIOS or software related, great, easily fixed. But if it's not, it's hardware related. And the 8 gigs being soldered is concerning because in a machine like this that is so powerful, between the brand new AMD Ryzen 9 chip, and which really basically benchmarks like a desktop class CPU, and then of course NVIDIA's RTX 3070, which also benchmarks like a desktop GPU, why on earth would you solder any of the RAM? We've got 2 NVMe slots for storage expansion. So if you're not happy with the 1 terabyte drive in here, which is a good drive, it's not best in class, but it's good, you can replace it, which if I end up keeping this machine, I will, just because I have faster storage that I would rather put in there, like the Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus that I shared a few days ago, which will blow this thing away, basically, the NVMe that's in there now. I just can't fathom any reason to solder the RAM onto the board other than really intentional obsolescence. So I'm not accusing Asus of anything. I'm not slandering them. But I understand when manufacturers need to solder RAM in order to make things fit. And when I review Ultrabooks, basically all of them, nearly all of them, the RAM is soldered. And the reason it's soldered is because they are trying to basically make the thinnest and lightest machine possible. This is not the thinnest and lightest machine possible. Granted, it is a whole new breed of machine at 4.5 pounds with the processing and graphics capability that it brings to the table. It still easily could have had regular RAM slots that neither were soldered. So again, I am not accusing Asus of anything. I'm not creating a conspiracy theory, but the fact that it is soldered is just really concerning, because when your 1-year warranty is up, if anything happens with that RAM, you are screwed. I don't know what the bill will be, but it will be hundreds, and you're going to pay it because you're not going to have another way of fixing it. Now, if it wasn't soldered, obviously you would just pull it out and throw in a new 8 gig DIMM. It would cost pennies on the dollar compared to whatever you will have to pay Asus to actually make that repair. So, pointing that out because it's an issue. The next thing, speakers. I mentioned this in my comparison. Speaker performance is very good. And occasionally, things get blown out. Now, I'm not sure that it's that we've got blown out speakers. I've got the audio muted right now, but either way, there's something going on. And while I really think the soundstage that this machine presents is great and that it isolates detail that a lot of other laptops don't, the fact that things get blown out and essentially bass turns into a popping noise, and I don't mean pop like metal contact, I mean like there's something wrong, that's possibly yet another quality control issue. And it's not just me. If you do a little bit of digging, aka Google is your friend, search, you will find that screen flickering, the speaker popping, or however you want to phrase it, it's a real thing. Now, the blue screen of death that I've experienced a few times, that may just be me. Okay? It may very well be me. But what I've just mentioned, the soldered RAM, the speaker pop, and of course the flickering display, that's not just me. That's possibly everyone. So what I'm getting at here is that if you're comfortable with purchasing this knowing that quality control may be in your favor or may not be, and you may have to go through some exchanges to get a quote-unquote perfect machine, even though there's no such thing, you know what I mean, then I have no reservations recommending the G15. It's amazing. I mean, what Asus has put together here is a phenomenal piece of hardware. Another thing that I want to point out, which I don't have a bad case of, but from research I've done, other users have reported quite a bit, is backlight bleed. So my backlight bleed on this particular panel is minimal, but I've seen some horrendous backlight bleed on other G15s that people have posted images of. So again, no fear-mongering, just the truth. This is something you need to be aware of that you may or may not encounter. And my personal history with Asus has been a mixed bag, both good and bad. But I have friends that, you know, the story goes that literally every Asus laptop they've purchased basically made it through the warranty and then it became ransom time. So I'm not saying that that's everyone's story, but I know enough to know that the reason I'm bringing up that soldered RAM being a red flag is for that reason. So, you know, right now on paper, this machine is impossible to beat at $1,800 US. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The CPU, GPU, display, keyboard, trackpad, battery life, you're not going to beat it. And more importantly, the fact that there's basically no throttling and it is virtually silent even in performance mode. I'm not saying it won't kick on, it will. If you watched my 4K demo, the 4K 120 Hz output, then you heard what the fans sound like at their loudest. They sound like what you would expect. What you wouldn't expect is what they don't sound like, which is basically nothing the majority of the time you're going to be using this machine. Now, through the course of me talking about QC, we went down 1%. We're at full brightness. Granted, I haven't been doing anything with the machine. It's estimating 10 hours. So this is where I started about the iGPU mode being on. If I go ahead and switch that to auto, then we're basically going back to default and letting NVIDIA decide, as far as I know, unless it's still inside of the Asus BIOS to make that decision. But I assume it's defaulting to NVIDIA, which is what most manufacturers do. And then, of course, you can turn it off altogether, which means NVIDIA GPU all the time, which is going to be the biggest hit on your battery life. But notice, nothing has happened with the fans. It's fairly amazing. So I don't want anyone to interpret this video in any way other than it is meant the purpose to serve, which is to say, I made already an update about how this machine is almost perfect, and that is still exactly where I stand. This is a testament to what computing can and should be. Asus deserves a tremendous amount of credit for what the G15 is capable of in such a small package that is still lap friendly. You can travel with. We're in a pandemic. Not a great idea to travel, folks. That's just my opinion and the World Health Organization, among many others. But the point here is that it's still not perfect. And there are a lot of fanboys and girls out there who are drinking Kool-Aid and running around saying this is the end-all be-all. And I'm here to let you know, to be that voice of reason, that I wish I could tell you it's perfect. But the only reason I haven't selected this machine over the Aero 15 yet is for the reasons I've mentioned thus far. Another thing I want to throw in there that I think will make some of you happy that care about it, no Thunderbolt 3 on here, but the good news is that the two Type-C ports will still play nice with Thunderbolt 3 hubs. So if you have a Thunderbolt 3 docking station, now I can't speak to all of them, but at least the ones that I've tested, it does work with. Now that may be a matter of age. If you're working with something much older, it might not work. Backwards compatibility, not great on first-gen models, but stuff that was made in the last few years, really 2019, 2020, you've got a better shot. Again, this is a case-by-case basis, but for those of you like myself, because I was one of them, that was worried I wouldn't be able to use a Thunderbolt 3 or 4 dock with this machine simply because it's not capable, it's not a Thunderbolt 3 or 4 device, the good news is you actually can. Of course, you won't get that throughput, but you will be able to connect one cable to drive all of your peripherals. So, and that is, for most people, the beauty of Thunderbolt 3. For me, I'm really looking for the throughput, the speed with external storage, but still something I wanted to bring up about the G15. So, again, a recap, quality control should be on your radar with this. You know, I highly recommend buying this from Best Buy. You know, I think the basic return period is 15 days, Elite is 30, and then whatever the next level is, which is where I'm at, is 45. So I'm going to have 45 days to figure out whether or not the problems I've discussed with you are hardware, software, or a little bit of both. And I talked about in the comparison the marriage of the AMD and NVIDIA, you know, the CPU-GPU marriage being a strange yet incredibly powerful one that I don't think is really software optimized yet, which also explains why when it comes to video editing, I've had quite a few crashes that I'm not experiencing on Intel, NVIDIA-based laptops, builds, I should say, in general. So again, today's video was really just about quality control. That's probably what I'm going to end up calling this. Now, the good news is the actual build of the unit is solid, even though a lot of people keep asking about, is it plastic, is it metal? So basically, my determination is that everything is plastic except for the lid itself. The lid has that, it's cool to the touch, that magnesium alloy finish, but I feel like the rest of it is plastic. That's just my feeling. Still love the fact that it's incredibly quiet. Still love the fact that you can charge this entire machine up in a little over an hour. I mean, that's just crazy. And now, if I do end up getting more than the 6-hour battery life I have been with the iGPU mode on, meaning we're basically shutting off the 3070 and using AMD's integrated graphics rather than the NVIDIA discrete, then this machine just became even more attractive. And that pretty much rounds things out. Again, this is going to be a long-term review for me. It's not going to be a 1 or 2 week hit and run, and then all of you buy this because I've said it's great, and then you find out you got a piece of shit. That's not how I operate. With manufacturers, they give me time frames to get things back to them. This I purchased, I've got 45 days. Of course, I don't have 45 days remaining, but over the course of that time, if the bugs continue, you're going to know about it. If they go away and BIOS updates resolve it, or I just find other methods. Like I was even thinking about the flickering having something to do with the FreeSync. It would be terrible to have to turn off FreeSync on here, but that's something I've already been playing with. And I, after shutting it off, haven't seen any flickering. So these are all, just ideas, food for thought. And also, I want your opinion. After all, it was one of you that said, hey, Ed, it wasn't in those words, try turning on the iGPU mode. And in doing so, there's definitely a battery gain here. So also, don't forget, you can trickle charge this thing. The Aero 15 that is competing with this to be my next little portable workhorse, can't trickle charge that guy. You can only go with the 230 watt power brick. Here, you can go with the proprietary brick from Asus, or you can trickle charge. Now, granted, you can't get the turbo mode with the trickle, but it's better to have a laptop than no laptop, right? So that's another advantage of this machine, and I don't think I mentioned that in my nearly 50-minute long comparison, and I should have. But again, just more real deal info, knowledge. That is power, folks, and having more of it is relevant in making an $1,800 plus tax decision. And for those of you that have been wondering, the 3060 model should start shipping in March, and I believe it's $1,500. It's a full HD panel at 144 hertz. That's going to be a great value, especially for those of you that plan on hooking this up to a monitor. And I don't know why you wouldn't. It's so powerful, even with the 3060, that if you're not gaming on a 4K display, hook this up to a monitor. Forget about the built-in display. I mean, granted, this is a very nice brand new panel that only exists on the G15. That is the QHD 15.5 inch, 165 hertz refresh rate. This is the only place you're going to find it, which makes it unique. But if you don't really care about that, and by the way, most professional gamers, most that are actually competitive, they're not going to game on a laptop screen. I've got a lot of comments about, 60 hertz on the Aero 15, unacceptable for gaming. Look, people who are really serious about gaming, I've got news. They don't do it on laptop displays. No matter how high the refresh rate, no matter how color accurate or pixel dense or low density, if that's your preference, depending on the GPU, most professional gamers, not most, I'm going to go to all, I can make that blanketed statement, they are going to use a real monitor, folks. Like the Asus 27-inch, 4K G-Sync monsters that I've got. So, at the end of the day, just be aware, quality control is an issue. Not just with Asus, but with all manufacturers to varying degrees. And while I'd love to tell you all that, this is one of those take my money situations because the AMD CPU is best in class, the NVIDIA GPU is best in class, and the display is best in class, and then battery life is too. I mean, whoa, the list goes on and on. The charge time is best in class. Be prepared to possibly deal with that flickering display, backlight bleed, popping speakers, some blue screen to death issues, and maybe some software crashing because the optimization for Intel may just be better still than it is for AMD. Just putting it out there in my 24-minute update. But it's something I had to get off my chest because I'm having a bit of a love-hate relationship with the G15 because so much potential is right here in this 4.5-pound package. And I want that potential. I want this to be my next laptop. But if I see it crash again during video editing, how can I? That's just unacceptable stuff. And if the screen flickering persists, there's got to be a hardware problem. And if there are, and the speaker pop, if it's a hardware problem, if there are that many hardware issues, then you should be scared shitless of that soldered 8 gigs of RAM. Not justifying it or telling me about how, well, the first 16 gigs will be dual channels, so go ahead and max it out at 40. You'll be fine. Don't worry. Be concerned. I'm giving you advice that is of value. So, the unicorn is real, but the unicorn might take a dump rather than just looking pretty. Just putting that out there. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them, and I expect them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.